Leaky gut syndrome is a glib description, but that's the kind of the generic word that's being used now to describe what technically is a small intestine colitis that is iatrogenic. It's due to interventions from Western medicines, mostly antibiotics and vaccinations. Is usually how it starts. So it's a modern problem. It's not recognized very much in conventional Western medicine, although it was discovered, promoted, and taught a lot by people in what's called functional medicine. Functional medicine is kind of a coalition of doctors that are medical doctors, naturopaths, chiropractors, and some acupuncturists. Functional medicine relies on Western testing, on Western physiology, but their methods for treatment are not pharmaceutical or surgical. If the naturopaths are doing it and the holistic medical doctors, they tend to use nutritional supplements. And I'm one of the few people that's recommending treating it with Chinese herbal medicine. And most of the people I teach, or all the people I teach, are acupuncturists who are trained in herbal medicine. So it's really an herbal medicine solution to a problem that's defined in Western physiology, in terms of Western scientific medicine. And I lecture a lot about this. I must have been lecturing on this subject 20 years now, and my basic information, even from 20 years ago, it's still valid today. I've gotten better on clinically, how I take it. A lot of cases now, people will say, well, I have leaky gut syndrome. And when I do the lab tests, I say, well, I don't think you have leaky gut syndrome, but you do have you do have different problems that the labs will help direct us to how to treat it. So what works here is the fact that we use laboratories. We use laboratories to figure out the degree and what kind of problems people have. You will not be able to discern a lot of this by traditional Chinese methods of pulse and tongue. It's just, you'll be lost. And it's not that pulses and tongues aren't relevant, but if you don't target some key aspects, which are, one, the microbes that might be involved, like candida or bad bacteria, and two, if there's inflammation or not, which I think can only be told by laboratories, and three, food allergies. So in leaky gut, the two big players are either microbes, pathogenic microbes, or food allergies. And so it's real important to use labs to test for these. The exception is New York State, which is very regulated with the labs, and the labs that I use are not recognized in New York State. So people in New York State, what they do if they're interested in these labs is they actually will get a mailing address out of New Jersey or Connecticut in order to send out and receive the reports. That's a New York State law that all the labs have to be certified by the state of New York, and these labs that I use are in Seattle, Washington, and they just don't want to go through the process of getting certified by the state of New York. The other labs, of course, is North Carolina, Geneva Labs. We'll talk about that lab also. So leaky gut, I want to just give an overview of what it is. It's an inflammatory condition of the small intestine that usually is started after antibiotics. When you get a dysbiosis, and now you'll have colonies of candida or bad bacteria that will actually injure the epithelium of the small intestine. And this will bring down the immune defenses and allow an infiltration of substances that should not be absorbed. These include undigested foods, these include bacteria themselves that are absorbed, viruses that are absorbed, and a lot of toxins. Toxins meant for excretion get absorbed, and then there's a cascade effect. The first thing that happens is the liver gets overwhelmed trying to detoxify all these new substances. And that toxicity will extend and cause a number of problems. such as migraine headaches. I think most 80% of migraine headaches, if they're not due to head injury, are probably due to leaky gut syndrome. Fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue, I'd say probably 80% of those are due to leaky gut syndrome. Where even if chronic fatigue or the fibromyalgia is due to viruses, the viruses have been absorbed and you're getting your reactions due to the virus, but it would not have happened if the small intestine had its integrity. The other conditions that it causes is eczema. I would say that 100% of pediatric eczema is due to leaky gut syndrome. Not psoriasis, which is its own thing. Psoriasis has a different milieu. And there are a lot of problems that people think are leaky gut syndrome that when we do the lab testing aren't. These might include irritable bowel syndrome. They definitely include a lot of the autoimmune diseases like Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis. These are usually not leaky gut cases. But any chronic problem can be compounded by leaky gut syndrome because two things. One, it's very common leaky gut because it follows antibiotics. There's so much antibiotics in the food chain and in the water, let alone medically prescribed, that a lot of people are set up for this condition. And so you might get it from a lot of chronic conditions will have leaky gut as a background. For example, multiple sclerosis case came to me and she said, can you do anything for multiple sclerosis? And I said, well, not really. I said, but we look for any stressors that may be affecting your immune system. And when we did a leaky gut assessment on her, she had terrible markers for leaky gut. So in any condition, you want to see if there's these other stressors and to take them off so the body can heal itself. The main problem with leaky gut is that it really brings down the immune system. And when the immune system goes down, the adrenals will get exhausted trying to deal with it, and this leads to a lot of problems. So the point of the story is you never know who has it and who doesn't without doing the lab testing. Now, the lab testing is not particularly expensive. Most patients will have chronic problems. It's not an issue. To my patients, the general panel we do through the stool is between $175 to $200, their price. If we do a blood test analysis for food allergens, the lab that I use that I really recommend, to the patient's price is around $200. So I don't do both tests at once because the first test, the stool test, will give me a pretty good idea if they have food allergies or not. It just won't identify the food allergies. But if the first test shows they probably have food allergies, then we go on to do the second test, which is the food allergies. And it's important to do the food allergy test. A lot of people are convinced they're allergic to foods when they really aren't. The problem is not an allergy. An allergy to a food is an inflammatory reaction. And so we have a marker that looks for inflammation. If there's not an inflammatory marker, there probably isn't food allergies. And when we do the food allergy test, they don't have it. And they say, well, I'm convinced I'm allergic to dairy or I'm convinced I'm allergic to gluten. But the real problem is not that they're allergic to those foods, that there's allergies means that there's antigens that are floating around specific to that food. And non-allergy, you won't have those antigens. And what the blood test does is it looks for those antigens and antibodies. But what they have is very poor digestion. And so they're not able to digest the foods completely. And they'll be uncomfortable. So the difference between a poor digestive food problem and an allergy is a poor digestive food problem is not destructive to the body. It's not harmful to the body. It's uncomfortable. You have bloating, you have loose stools, you might even have headache, but it's not inflammatory. A real food allergy is inflammatory and has a lot of consequences because of that inflammation. And when I test, actually what I found over the years is there's less food allergies out there than you think. When people pendulum and muscle test and Whole Foods, oh, you're allergic to this, and you're allergic to that, it's probably not an allergy. It just could be an inability to digest the food, which is not really an inflammatory reaction. So So they're treated differently. They're treated differently. I mean, food allergies, if they're real, you've got to get off the foods while you heal the guts. Does anybody here do NAET or Bioset? These are treatments to clear allergies, and these people, what they try to do is clear the antibodies out of the system. And NAET especially will say, well, we cleared it and you can eat those foods tomorrow. 24 hours you can eat these foods, which is absolutely not the case. The guts need to heal, and it can take at least 2 months to heal the guts. So any real food allergies you have to keep off for at least 2 months, and sometimes 9 months. Some food allergies are so stubborn, it takes a very long time. Even with NAET or Bioset clearance, it can be very stubborn. Ultimately, you say to the patient, whatever bothers you as a food, don't eat it. Just don't eat it. Stay away from it. Whether it's an allergy or someone says, I eat tomatoes and my skin itches, or I eat wheat and I don't feel well, I don't digest it well, just stay away from it. Stay away from the foods that bother you. I mean, that's a given. Most food allergies, however, are hidden. Almost all migraines are food triggers. And if you don't identify the foods, and the person has to stay off of it 100%, you won't get anywhere. You won't get anywhere if it's a food trigger and you don't know what that food is. Now, the other things we do in lab testing is we find out how strong the digestive system is. We find out what kind of microbes they might have. We want to know how strong their immune system is in their guts. And when we start testing, it's really sad because in this modern day and age, most of us have really lowered immune systems. We have really lowered digestive tracts, the digestive ability. And when that happens, ultimately you set yourself up for more serious conditions. The most obvious one is cancer. What keeps cancer at bay is your own immune system. Your own immune system is exquisitely designed to search and destroy precancerous cells when they're very small. And natural killer cells do this, and it's a wonderful mechanism. When somebody wants to prevent cancer, the main way is to promote your own ability to fight your own cancer. And the ingredients for this comes in foods. So people that don't eat enough fruits and vegetables are going to not have the building blocks to build an immune system. The adrenal strength is extremely important for the immune system. And if the adrenals are depleted because it's been fighting toxins, your immune system is going to crash. Any stressors add to this. So our modern daily lifestyle is very stressful. And as practitioners, we try to identify the stressors. Now, some of those stressors are emotional and work and lifestyle. What I really look for is what I call the biological stressors, the hidden stressors that people just aren't aware of. So if you have a food allergy, you're constantly stressing yourself. If you have microbes like candida or bad bacteria in your system, you're constantly stressing yourself. So these are stressors that we can identify and fix. Other stressors, I tell some patients, I'll write you a blank check and I'll take care of your parents, and you'll be healthy, because they're stressors you really can't do anything about. I mean, most people are stressed by relationships, work, or money, and those are things you can't do anything about. And the person is maybe totally aware of it. I've never had a person mystified by what their stressors were. What's stressing you, and boom, they'll tell you. My parents have to go into a nursing home. My kid is acting out. My husband's losing his job. We don't know what he's going to do. I mean, these are stressors that people are aware of, right? So these are things you can't do much about. We can take off the stress with acupuncture, with herbs, and so on, and it helps. But when we can get to the biological stressors, if we can identify candida, bacteria, so on, we can do something about it. If we can identify a weak spleen chi, low weight chi, we can do something about it and rehabilitate. But if there's an irritant and you don't deal with the irritant, this is where Chinese medicine fails. If it doesn't recognize the irritant and take away the irritant, that person will not get better. And it's very easy to treat. I mean, leaky gut syndrome has a lot of steps to it. I mean, this handout here is 43 pages long. There's a lot of steps to it, but it's not a complicated subject. It really isn't, and it doesn't have to be complicated. If you start using the labs and really specializing in leaky gut, what you need is patience, because difficult cases can take up to 9 months to cure, or longer. And I'm going to go through some cases of the unusual ones that defy the logic and that defy the steps that I'm recommending. Cases where, why aren't they getting better? And there are complicating factors. As your body goes down and loses its reserves and loses its digestive strength, the cases are much harder to treat. And it's much slower. It's obvious. And this is why I like treating children. They have so much vitality that they respond really fast, right? And old people respond really slow. I hate treating old people. They're very impatient and they want results, and they just have no chi. They have no life force to heal themselves. So Chinese medicine works best where they have their own life force that we can work with. So this is the problem, and that's a continuum from childhood to old age. Where are they in this continuum? There's something that happens around age 40 where suddenly the body starts losing it, and every 10 years it goes down a notch. 50, 60, 70, it keeps going down a notch significantly. Now there are some people there are exceptions. I mean, old people that have tremendous vitality, young people that are very weak, but we're working with what we got, so hopefully the patient will be cooperative. The best cooperation is taking the medicine. I tell patients that medicines work so much better if you actually swallow them. Well, I'm not taking my medicine. Well, I'm not doing it. It helps. And herbal medicines need to be taken at least twice a day. And I say at least, but most patients will probably only get it in there once a day. And I'm telling you, it's just not good enough. Once a day is just not good enough. In the best of all worlds, they would take it 3 times a day. But it's impossible to get patients to take medicines 3 times a day unless they're suffering. It's something acute, like a sore throat or a headache. Then they'll take their medicines often. But if the symptoms run under the radar, they won't take the medicine. So a lot of it is compliance, talking them into it, making it easy for them. I tell some patients, if it's pills, leave the medicine in your bathroom. Take it before you go to bed, take it when you get up in the morning. And it's just done. It's just a done deal. There are reactions to other vaccines, but they may not cause leaky gut. For example, in adults, at least 3 cases I've seen of chronic fatigue due to rabies vaccinations. That happened after someone was bit by a suspected animal. And they didn't have rabies, but they had a reaction to the rabies vaccination. And I've seen reactions to tetanus, I've seen reactions to flu. And this is a whole nother class of problems, diagnosing that and treating them. But that underlies a lot of it. So leaky gut, it's a modern problem. It's not described in Chinese medicine at all. I've seen Chinese doctors just totally flounder on this. They don't relate the food triggers to eczema. They don't relate candida and so on, because it's not described in Chinese medicine. The reason it's not described is it's new. It's only since antibiotics, which was 60, 70 years out there. These problems did not exist before antibiotics and vaccinations. Now, if you go into the Chinese literature, they're recognizing the problems that the modern medicines have caused, such as ADHD, which is a modern problem, autism, which is a modern problem, sheer amounts of eczema, pediatric eczema, which is a very modern problem. So it's a modern situation. Did not exist. Chinese want to know where to begin. When you look at their formulas for eczema, they all deal with the skin. But what's happening on the skin is completely mirrors what's happening on the skin inside the small intestine. It mirrors the inflammation of the small intestine. Now, diagnostically in Western medicine, until very recently, and it's still not widespread. There's no way medical doctors can scope the inside of the small intestine. They can scope the large intestine and they can see lesions, but they can only see the very distal end of the small intestine. Now they're doing scopes into the small intestine, but they're not widespread. So they don't know, the small intestine is 28 feet long in an adult. It's huge. So they don't know what's in there. But now they're starting to scope it and see it. But most GI specialists don't know what leaky gut is. Most medical doctors do not think that Candida is a pathogenic organism. The reason for that is any stool culture will say the person has Candida. So you use the local hospital lab and they say, oh, he's got Candida, he's got fungus, he's got yeast. So they don't think it's a big deal. The better labs will quantify it on a 0 to 5. And depending on the quantification of the Candida, we know how serious the problem is. Candida is a very serious pathogen. Funguses are in this world to suck the remaining life out of dying things. That's their job. So they're always around, but they take advantage of pathogenic conditions. So a tree falls, and you do a time-lapse film of that tree, eventually mushrooms start growing on it, and then the thing just turns into dust. Sawdust, right? That's what mushrooms do. They pull out the last life of dying things. So that's what's happening in your guts. We have destroyed the life force in the guts, and so now fungus can thrive. If fungus is thriving in the body, it's because your life force is diminished. Your immune system is down. That's why the fungus are taking off. If your immune system's strong, fungus never takes off. But because so many other factors have lowered the immune system, the fungus is taking off. The one exception to that is people with blood sugar problems. If the blood is full of sugar, fungus will also grow. So a lot of people with fungus on their skin, it's because they have elevated blood sugars. Usually the Candida type problem is just in the guts. It's not in the body. People who have fungus in their bodies, because their immune system is very punky. So we'll see it in HIV people. We'll see it in AIDS. We'll see it in people on immunosuppressant medications will have problems with fungus. To the medical world, they'll just say it's thrush. Oh, they have thrush. That's as far as it goes. But Candida releases an aldehyde that irritates the epithelial tissue. And that aldehyde, it's not inflammatory, but it's destructive. So that's why someone can have lots of Candida, but on our labs not show a high inflammation. We only get the inflammation with food allergies. Sometimes we'll get it with certain bacteria or viruses. But Candida by itself usually doesn't make an inflammatory reaction. But it injures the tissue and it shrinks. The cells shrink, literally shrink, and particles can now infiltrate into the small intestine and into the blood flow. Particles of junk, particles of undigested food, hormones meant for excretion, bad bacteria, bad viruses, toxins, hormones, chemicals, just get absorbed. And the liver, which was never designed to deal with this, and by design I mean evolved, our livers are amazing detoxification mechanisms. But they're overloaded, they can't do it. So they just put it back in circulation. That's why you get headaches. That's why you get neurotransmitter deficiencies. A lot of people with anxiety, depression really may have leaky gut as the basis of it, because 80% of our serotonin is made in the intestines, and if they're damaged, you don't make serotonin. Okay, so describing leaky gut is, my description is coming from functional medicine. And like I say, functional medicine is based in Western medicine in the sense of physiology and so on. But the solutions that work well, it's not Chinese medicine in isolation, but it's a combination of Chinese medicine and naturopathic nutritional supplements. That there are different therapies we can use, that it's never one thing works all by itself. which a lot of times Chinese herbs does. You know, for a lot of problems, Chinese herbs is the only thing they need. But leaky gut's more complicated, and I think that the combining of herbs and nutrients is the way to go. But a nutritional practitioner who doesn't use Chinese herbs is relying on the patient taking lots of nutritional supplements. The real problem with nutritional supplements is you got to take a lot of them, and they're expensive. Herbs are much more bang for the buck. They're much more concentrated, they're much more potent. So if you go to a naturopath, they'll give you, 8 different products, and you got to take 4 of each twice a day, and before you know it, all you do is taking pills. And patients don't like that. I mean, some patients like it, but patients come in with bags of stuff that they're taking, either self-medicating or reading about it on Google or somebody giving it to them. And that's just not right. It's just not right. Nobody should be taking that much medicine to get better. It's crazy. They only do that in America. If you go to Europe, they don't take supplements like this at all. They think Americans are crazy with the supplements. All right, so I'm going to try to stick to my schedule just because there's so much material. You have a good handout here, which will describe a lot of what we're doing. Let me just organize this a little bit better. Okay, so I'm going to take you through this. A lot of it's written, and a lot of it's what I already said. And I'll be talking around what's on the notes.